For 1 week every January, Davos in Switzerland turns into the world's most expensive pop-up stage, where influence comes with a price tag, and even a small patch of space on the promenade can cost a fortune. But among the familiar crowd of business leaders, CEOs, and heads of state, there was a palpable shift this year. More delegates from Africa were not in Davos to watch, but to sell a message that Africa is rising and that it's investable. Nigeria House took one of the prime spots on the promenade and became one of the busiest and most talked about national bases at the forum. Arise correspondent Rolake Akinkugbe-Filani shared this report.
Davos is not for the faint of heart or the light of wallet. For 1 week every January, this quiet ski village turns into the world's most expensive pop-up stage, where influence comes with a price tag, and even a small patch of space on the promenade can cost a fortune. But among the familiar crowd of billionaires, CEOs, and heads of state, there's a shift you can feel this year. More delegates from Africa, not here to watch, but to sell a message. Africa is rising, Africa is investable, Africa is open for business.
And so there's never a better time than now to come and invest in Nigeria.
At the front of that push is Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation and one of its biggest economies. Nigeria House has taken one of the prime spots on the promenade, and it's become one of the busiest and most talked about national bases at the forum.
Nigerian House represents a deliberate statement. We see it as a platform where Nigeria constructively engage with global partners. We also see it as a space where policy hopefully meets capital, where ambition meets execution, and perhaps also where partnerships are shaped around a shared global priority.
Inside, the design is doing diplomacy. Power polished up in chandeliers, softened with traditional Nigerian artisan craft. And the pitch is clear. This is modern Nigeria, confident, connected, and ready for capital. Even the catering plays its part. Jollof rice on the menu, a taste of home, served in the middle of the global elite. As Davos awaits the arrival of U.S. President Donald Trump, who's been talking of tariffs and an American-first agenda, Nigeria House is sending a very different message. We have to work together to solve our global challenges.
We're talking about a world seeking energy security, a world also that is trying to digitally transform, providing economic resilience, stability, as well as sustainable growth, as well, again, as inclusive development, especially in the countries of the global south, where Nigeria belongs. So incidentally, all these are being done at the same time. And these priorities aligned closely with Nigeria's national reform agenda.
The packed program of events and discussion panels is packed with business leaders and entrepreneurs, all pushing a similar message: a rising Africa and global cooperation benefits us all.
We're living at a very, very important and critical time in modern history. The demand for critical minerals, which is largely driven by the global energy transition. So the demand for all these minerals is what is actually driving policies today. And if you look at the sea's natural resources, which the global world economy cannot survive without today, we all have all these in Nigeria.
Back home, Nigeria's economic realities are in sharp focus, and so questions remain about whether Davos is worth the price of entry. Organizers say the week has delivered and that these conversations matter. But behind the reception and the branding, the test is simple. Will the capital flow, and who will benefit when it does?
Well, the global trading system is under strain, from rising tariffs and geopolitical rivalry to growing doubt about multilateral rules. In an interview from the World Economic Forum, World Trade Organization Director General Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala spoke with our rice anchor, Rolake Akinkugbe-Filani, about why this year's event presented a unique opportunity for Nigeria to lead trade reform on the continent, formalize its vast informal trade economy, and position itself as a credible anchor for intra-African and global commerce in an increasingly fragmented world.
It's been a very eventful week at Davos. And one thing many of our African viewers and Nigerian viewers want to know is, what opportunity is there for Nigeria and Africa now in the global trading system, given what many have called the end of the age of multilateralism? Do you even believe that multilateralism has ended?
No, multilateralism, well, thank you. First, I think there are many opportunities for Africa and Nigeria in the present global trading environment. I know it's very gloomy. What you hear about trade is very pessimistic, that trade has been destroyed, global trade rules are no longer working. It is true that trade has been severely disrupted for the biggest disruption in 80 years. But I just want to say that almost 3/4 of world trade is still going on WTO terms. So there's disruption, but the system is resilient. And I think we can build into that resilience, because what is happening is that many countries and many businesses are seeking diversification of trade, because you have seen some weaponization of trade in a way, or what I would call over-dependence. I think many businesses and many suppliers are finding that maybe they are too dependent on certain countries for markets and too dependent on others for supplies. And if you get the vast majority of your supplies from one country and you depend on the one country for your markets, then they can rise up one day and say, listen, we no longer want you. So what they're trying to do is diversify. In that context,
yes,
Nigeria, with a large market of 220 million, we're 220 million with a sizable middle class, has a chance to attract some of these supply chains that are trying to diversify in pharmaceuticals, in textiles, agro-processing, so many areas where I think we can have a comparative advantage. So I think this is our time.
Indeed.
But it will not fall on our laps. We have to work for it, and I think this is the direction.
And that brings me to really the final point. One of the things that you said on the panel is that intra-Africa trade is 15 to 20%. We've talked about the very large informal trading market. What are the critical, maybe your top 2 priority reforms that we need to really implement, consolidate, and institute to see that 15 to 20% go to 50%, if you like, over the next few years?
2 things. One, we need to add value to our products, even for the intra-Africa market, because we are trading even with each other. We have mostly commodities and raw materials that we're trading. And 60% of our exports elsewhere is all still raw commodities. And I know it's changing, and African leaders are recognizing now that they have to change. So they're making moves.
Right.
But we need to accelerate that, add value. That way we can trade different products to each other. I'm very excited that Nigeria might be able to take over the African market in textiles and apparel.
Indeed.
Because we have powerful people in fashion.
You're a true representation.
Yeah, and if we can scale it, and the Honorable Minister of Commerce, of Industry, Trade and Commerce says industry, trade and commerce.
And investment.
And investment. I'm missing one word, industry, trade and investment. Says we're already working on trying to scale up some of this. We need to scale it so we can capture the African market, because we have a strong advantage in that particular area. Ditto pharmaceuticals and some other areas that one could talk about. So you can see. And digital trade.
Yes.
And digitally delivered services trade. Our women and our young people are doing amazing things. Honestly, I have to admire them. If we can capitalize on that, we can capture a big slice of the African market.
Thank you so much for ending on a very optimistic note. Yeah. I know it's a busy week for you at Davos, so we're going to let you go.
Thank you,
Dr. Konjo-Iweala of the WTO.
The new Nigeria People's Party, NNPP, has expressed disappointment over the resignation of Kano State Governor Abba Kabir Yusuf, describing his defection as a betrayal of the mandate entrusted to him by the people. In a statement, NNPP National Publicity Secretary Ladipo Johnson said Yusuf's election was built on his long-standing association with the Kwakwansia movement and the trust of Kano voters. Johnson dismissed Yusuf's claim that his departure was due to an irredeemable crisis within the party, calling it baseless and an afterthought. All right, Adiswa, Kano is in the news, and Kano has obviously gone the way of a few other opposition states in the course of last year. Akwa Ibom, Delta, Bayelsa, a few other states like that. But of course, Kano wasn't PDP. Kano was NNPP, a Lone Ranger up there in the north.
Yes.
People thought that, just like Labour was able to produce the governor of Abia State, that NNPP's, with Kwakwansia movement and the former governor of Kano State, Rabi Musa Kwakwanso, that at least we would have, different voices, speaking through to power, at least giving people alternatives. But then it doesn't look like that is going to happen anytime soon. So the governor of Kano has left the party, and the party is responding, saying that it's a betrayal of what the party stands for. It's a betrayal of the Kwakwansia movement that brought him, practically from nowhere, to become the governor of possibly one of the most important states in Nigeria, and definitely one of the three key states that it used to be said that for a president to emerge, you need to win at least two of those three. Talking about Lagos, talking about Kano, and talking about Rivers. And interestingly, in 2023, without much prediction, the gentleman, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who emerged as the president, didn't win two. Lost his home state of Lagos State, lost Kano to Kwakwanso, right? And then, of course, he managed to pick, as we were told, River State.
As we were told.
Well, I mean, emphasis yours. So here, Kano, the interesting thing beyond what NNPP is saying is that for the first time going into a major election like we will have next year, it looks like for the first time ever, the ruling party in Nigeria will be controlling all those three key states, Lagos, Rivers, and Kano. Mind you, it's only Lagos in terms of the sitting governor that was won through an election. Simfubara of PDP defected to the party, and then Kabir Yusuf of NNPP also defected to the party. Maybe they will retain those states at the elections next year, but this is the first time that you will have Kano, Rivers, and Lagos State, being in the same boat as that of the ruling party. And people are saying that this sort of political strategy, some other people will say wizardry, is unprecedented on the part of the president and his party. But then, do you truly build a political consensus when all it seems to the people is that you're just basically winning them over and not winning through elections? Kano will be an example, and next year is almost here.
Yes, I think, that for me, there are very many things in this that are very interesting. First, when we look at the Kwankwasia movement and what Kwankwaso has been able to build, not solely about his personality, but also the philosophy around the Kwankwasia movement. It's been very powerful in Kano. It's been very powerful in that region. And so it's one of the few times that we see people talk about political parties having some sort of ideology. In Nigeria, we're not used to political political parties having ideologies that very much align with the person that they're electing. For example,
except in the First Republic, I believe.
Like in this Fourth Republic, it does not very much exist. And even those parties that originally have ideologies, like the Labour Party, is supposed to be, quite leftist. It's supposed to be Labour-oriented. But then the candidates are ex-bankers, Alex Otti in Abia State or Peter Obi for presidential. They don't necessarily align with the original ideology of what the party is supposed to stand for. For me, NNPP and the Kwankwasia movement represented some sort of difference to that. So to see it just be tossed aside as any other thing is in Nigeria, I think is a bit heartbreaking. Politics aside, I think it's a bit heartbreaking because that red cap movement was supposed to symbolize more than just a political movement. So I think on that end, some people are talking about disloyalty to the ex-governor, disloyalty to the people who voted him. And also to the people who voted him in. The images of the governor, ex-governor Kwankwaso, waiting outside the INEC office praying, holding the fort very strongly to make sure that the people's mandate wasn't stolen. And so it seems that all that was in vain because the people voted out the APC. They voted out the Gandujes. They voted that out in Kano. There was a very strong anti-APC sentiment. So for the governor to just switch, I would imagine that there is a deep sense of grief and betrayal for people in Kano State. Beyond the president, the run into the election for 2027 and those calculations. Now, when we move to that, when we talk about APC holding Rivers or holding Lagos or holding Kano State, what we are seeing here is very significant in that there is a calculation of the political elite that once you get the person on top, you get their machinery, you get their structure, you get the people. What Peter Obi proved last election cycle is that that's not necessarily true. You can have the governors, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the people will still vote against that. And I think that is what he has proven to not be true. The fact that that was proven to not be true and the political elite is still acting as though the calculus remains
for the presidential election.
Yes, especially for that. Now, us knowing that that's true and the political elite have ignored that and are calculating and going about things as though the status quo remains is, for me, very worrying because it shows a significant gap between the people and those who lead the people, between understanding what people want and giving them what you think that they can handle. At some point in time, our political elite and our people in positions of power are going to have to have a real conversation with themselves because they do not want to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And I think this gap, the wealth gap between the very rich and the very poor, the understanding gap between the polity and those who lead them, those gaps keep expanding. It keeps expanding, and I don't think that there's a true temperature be taken here by the people who are in positions of power. And for me, that's very worrying going into the next election cycle. I don't think we have truly healed as a nation from the past one. I don't think we have built up trust, and I don't think that the people who needed to learn lessons, on the internet they always say, oh, lessons will be learned. I don't think the people who really needed to learn the lessons have chosen to learn the right ones. What we have seen now is consolidation of power at the top. That does not trickle down.
And it doesn't necessarily reflect, like you said earlier, what the people might be thinking, given what Peter Obi and the Labour Party did. And I will want to imagine that maybe that's part of the thinking within ADC, that it really wouldn't matter how many governors are within the kitty, on your side. The people are different from their governors. Even if they will vote differently when it comes to the gubernatorial elections, that they tend to want to express their own feelings, during the presidential election, which will explain why APC, with about 21 governors in 2023, managed only to win 12 states during the presidential election. So that could be an indication that even if you are now approaching 2027 with about 30 governors, we don't know if there will be, one more person coming or two, that does not necessarily mean that you will clear 30 states when it comes to presidential election. But of course, I would want to imagine that maybe the strategy within APC is not just to capture, in quotes, the governors, but to also have, a way to deal with the people. How do you deal with the people without, of course, showing results of what you have done in terms of the economy, in terms of security, in terms of social infrastructure, and of course, in terms of what is in your pocket? Maybe those are the things that we will begin to see from the second half of this year, and then day of reckoning will come ultimately. But we'll see.
We will see, because the pockets of some people are getting larger, but again, concentration of power, concentration of money, it is not, I don't think this is ideal.